and you hear, as you are sitting down, somebody announces to you, "Oh, welcome to flight so. We are delighted to let you know that the pilot has no idea how to fly this plane, and he has no idea how you are going to get to your destination, but God willing, we will arrive there." Everybody will make for the exit immediately.
Of course.
Straight away. But we seem to have this idea that policymakers can be elected, selected, or appointed, and without any idea of what the demographic profile of their country, state, local government is, that somehow they are going to deliver. They don't know how many children are going to be born this year or have been born this year. They don't know where there are no schools. They don't know where there are no roads. They don't know, how many maternity clinics are there and so forth. And somehow people hope that things are going to turn out okay. So awareness of the profile is not enough. Policymakers need training on the implication of the profile. And this is really where there is a big failing in Nigeria.
All right. When people hear the civil registration, a lot of things come to mind. But you would have to explain to us what that would be. And what its role would be in data and planning. Does it mean the civil registration, can it be something equated to the NIN that we have? Is that one way of doing that?
Okay, so civil registration, for those who don't know, I assume most people should, but for those that don't, is the registration of birth and the registration of death and the causes of death. I mean, it really is a basic requirement for every country to understand what is happening. And civil registration helps to hold the data together between censuses. Now, to give an example, if you go to a local government in a developed country and ask the official in charge of education, because local governments should have desk officers in charge of education, in charge of health, in charge of roads, and we don't have that in Nigeria, and it's a big shame. It's a huge gap in planning. But if you go to a developed country and say, "Oh, can I see the desk officer in charge of education in this local government?" and you ask him or her, in 5 years' time, how many children are expected to start school in September at the age of 5 or 6, depending on what the age is in that country, they will just tell you, "Just give me a few minutes," and they will go and compute it and let you know. Because the civil registration, for that local government,
yes,
if it is complete, will let them know how many kids are to start school. And it's not just that information in the abstract. It will help them know, based on the birth rates in this year, in 5 years' time, do we have enough schools for these kids?
But with the use of
enough teachers?
But with the use of the NIN, because one time Nigerians even got really tired with the collection of data. We had the BVN, and then there was the NIN, and you still go to open a bank account, you still need to register, even if the banks can have access to your NIN, that should have all the necessary information. It's just a lot of data collection, but seem like we don't have a central point where all of these data are put together. Could those be related to can those work with the civil registration? Can they help in planning? Can you use those data?
No, it won't, because the point of the civil of the NIN registration, we are told, is that people are committing crimes with their telephones, and that the NIN will help to track criminals. Now, I don't know how many bandits that have abducted villagers, farmers, school children, or train passengers. I don't know how many of those bandits have been arrested using their NIN. So the need information in terms of data and planning is really of no use. Besides, it is domiciled in the wrong place. If you say national identity number, what is the business of the Ministry of Communication with that? It should be in the Ministry of Planning. So let us assume, for instance, that everybody has one. If you are 18 and above, or if you have a phone, if it is to be of any use at all, it should be in the Ministry of Planning. So the former Minister of Communication, street balance, hijacked a road that did belong to him and made it, into what it was. And now, no state, no local government can plan based on NIN data. It doesn't even tell you specifics of what you need for planning. And in any case, the Ministry of Communication does not build schools, does not build hospitals, does not build roads, does not build a maternity clinic and so forth like that. So, the civil registration is what is actually needed. And let me just give one quick example of why this is really important. If a local government or a state cannot anticipate how many children are to start school in 5 years' time, and if they have enough teachers or schools, and if not, what is the deficit? It means they can't plan in advance to make up for those teachers, for those schools. And what is likely to happen is that this two children number we have in Nigeria, which is currently estimated at 20 million, they start to cluster in certain areas. And you know what happens when you have 20 million out of school children in any country. It means that you are supplying the numbers for bandits, for extremists, for gangs, for Agbero, for militias, and so forth like that. Then somebody will turn around and say, the service chiefs are not providing enough security. Well, in reality, that's not the job of the service chiefs at all. It is not. It is the job of planning from the beginning to make sure that the bandits, extremists, militias, Agbero, gangs, and so forth do not have a steady supply chain of human resources by making sure that the schools are there, primary, secondary, and so forth. If you wish to understand a bit more of this, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll be used to me sharing this kind of data. If you don't, go to @Rotimi Sankore, and you will see I've been tweeting about some of these things over the last week or two. There was a newspaper report where the outgoing chief of defense staff was saying that with the appointment of the successor, the peace in Nigeria is guaranteed. And I'm asking, how can one single general guarantee peace? Does he build schools? So there is a wrong narrative, going on. And civil registration and the analysis of the civil registration is one of the things that can help contribute to peace and development in Nigeria.
Okay. We had the World Population Day just 2 days, 3 days ago, 2 days ago to be precise, July 11. And it brought up the conversation of the census that we are long overdue to carry out, long overdue, way long overdue. For many people, they have their questions about the census, but I'd like to start with this question. Why is a census necessary?
Well, the importance of a census, it should be self-evident. But in Nigeria, where you have this, bizarre word called politicization,
Exactly.
Yes. Honestly, that word is the most bizarre word I have had ever, anywhere in the world, politicization. The census, the importance of it should be self-evident. I gave the example of education when I was talking of civil registration. But the census also tells us, for instance, where to build roads, where the roads should be going to, what kind of transport networks we need, where the transport network should be connecting. where to connect, where you have to connect people to the electricity grid, where to, to locate the substations, where to put the transformers, where to build the primary health centers, where to make the water supply available. I mean, there is this bizarre thing in Nigeria called pure water, which is sold in plastic sachet. I mean, what's the meaning of that? If you go to any developed country, every building has water piped into it from a central system, and that water is coming from a water treatment plant. So it's called the Population and Housing Census for a reason, because it means that public facilities, can be directed because the information is there. They know how many buildings are on a street, what kind of buildings they are. So if you are going to pipe water from the water treatment plant to street A, there are 100 buildings. You know the type of buildings, the size of buildings. You estimate the length of the pipe and so forth like that. So when all these things are missing, you start having crazy concussions, pure water, I mean, it's insane, and in rainy season like this, you start to see the implication of those kind of things. If you look at a city like Lagos, for instance, said to be 20 million people, if each person there is drinking 5 sachets of pure water a day, just imagine, that's 100 million pieces of plastic, 100 million every day, not being recycled, ending up in the drainage. If you just compute, that's 100 million times 10 days. That's a billion pieces of plastic. 3 billion pieces of plastic a month floating around. After just 2 or 3 hours of rain, the whole place is flooded. Cars are submerged completely in the middle of the city, not at a river bank burst somewhere, because of 3 days of rainfall. 2 hours rainfall in middle of the city. All the gutters are overflowing. So, all these kind of small problems, if you have a census, your public services, electricity, pipe-borne water, roads, health, education, it helps. When people say census is politicized, what they are thinking of is, the politicians inflate number to collect.
But that's a follow-up question I was about to ask you, because many people now don't even feel the interest to participate in the census of the country, because most of the times they already have there's this general idea, like you've mentioned, that it's politicized, and certain areas, states, I mean, remember the last census and the arguments that happened between Lagos, I think it was Kanu, which was which had the most population. It took an external body to conduct its own and said it was Lagos, but then the government of the country had said from its figures, well, this is where, and geographically speaking, people and experts did not agree, because they felt it was almost impossible for coastal areas to be less populated than desert areas anywhere in the world. So these sort of things, how it plays a role in even people coming out to be counted. So we have the actual figures that we need to have for the development that we're talking about. How do we change that narrative?
So the information that we have from the Population Commission,
yes,
of which I'm not a spokesperson, but of course I ask questions. I'm a development journalist, I'm a policy, advocate and so forth. So I ask these questions and I interact with stakeholders. So the Population Commission, and most importantly, the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, which is the biggest global technical global partner for population censuses worldwide, have asked questions from them about how this is going to happen. And they have said that this census, which is overdue, which the previous administration, Buhari government, postponed, only heaven knows why, that it is going to be the first digital census in the country, and that it is less likely that the figures will be manipulated. And they've explained in detail. They've said, you see, the people who are working, the enumerators, and
We
there
had-
are processes for these tablets to work. You can only work within a certain area.
Mr. Rotimi,
You know,
but doesn't this sound like what we had with the INEC and the election and the Beavers machine and all of those? And then afterwards, there were questions.
Okay, so let me finish. So they've said that as people are working with these tablets, which they have said cannot be interfered with, that the information is going straight to the clouds. And therefore, individual manipulation is not possible. I mean, this is what they have said. Like I said, I'm not a spokesperson for the Population Commission.
Yes.
However, as we know in the world, I mean, nothing is 100%, guaranteed. I mean, if you look at even rockets that are supposed to be launched into space, that they go over everything 100 times before they launch the rocket, sometimes things go wrong. So there is a possibility that it may not be 100% foolproof in some areas. But the point, however, is if you don't participate in the census, you can't come out later and say there is no school in your area. You can't come out and say there is no health center in your area. You can't come out and say there is no road leading to your area, and so forth. Because if you don't participate, even with the best of intention, the government, will not be able to say, oh, this is where the public services are needed for X amount of people. So I do understand the doubt that the public has. I mean, there are high levels of distrust in government, and for good reason. I mean, Nigeria is certainly one of the most corrupt countries in the world. But for things like census, I will say, let us give it a go and see. If there are mistakes, error, some things don't work in some places, we learn from it. We have lost a lot in not having a census for about 2 decades now, which if we had been doing it, we would have been learning. I mean, look at the debacle that happened with the INEC. Now we know, we know what can go wrong. So next time we know what to do about it.
All right. The role of census in tackling insecurity and also for even elections, because that is another place where many people think the figures are tampered with, election purposes, resource sharing purposes, the list goes on and on. How is the population census related to all of these?
So when I was talking earlier, I was alluding to the fact that if you look at issues like peace and security in Nigeria, the insecurity essentially is worse, in places where public services like education are non-existent or very poor. Now, at the height of the Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, some of us interrogated the data that existed at the time, including the historical data from the Bureau of Statistics and from other bodies. And behold, we found out that one of the problems in Borno and Yobe states was that in one state, 83% of males had never seen the inside of a primary school. And in the other state, 63% of males had never seen the inside of a primary school. In other words, only 17% and 27% of males in Borno and Yobe had received even primary education at the time. So no wonder that the extremists had a field day recruiting in those kind of places. Because if you can't read and write and you are in poverty, then it is a problem in terms of understanding what is happening in the society. And if an extremist comes and says to you, look at those people that claim that they are educated, they are driving big SUVs about and they're living a life of opulence and so on and so forth, then they coin phrases like against Western education. Whereas the problem is not education. The problem is poverty and illiteracy. But because those who are illiterate are in the majority, you know, 83% cannot read or write, have not been inside a primary school before, then you see where the problem is coming from. So the data can tell you where is the peace and security issues. I mean, the data can tell you where the peace and security issues are likely to be better or worse, just from basic things like education. Also, if you look at large ungoverned spaces. So, for instance, in Lagos, the out-of-school children as of last year, and this is in the large ungoverned spaces living inside the country called Nigeria. Somebody can go and mobilize them and say, oh, look, if we go to that secondary school there and grab 50 children, we will get 50 million for them, and they follow them. But in Lagos, the outlets for those out-of-school children, because it is densely populated, is likely to be in things like Agbero, you know, street gangs, and so forth like that, you know, or, you know, apprentice work. Because a dense population means that more services are needed. You know, you need carpenters, you know, you need plumbers, you need vulcanizers, you need electricians, and so forth. So people send their children at young ages to go and learn those things, even though that is not quite the right way, you know, for the vocational education to be done. So, you know, the census can tell you, based on a combination of factors like access to education, you know, the geographical expanse, you know, multidimensional poverty, it can tell you in advance where the insecurity, the fragility is likely to manifest in 5 years, in 10 years. And if I look at the data in Nigeria today, I can tell you that that some states may not even exist in Nigeria. In 10, 15, or 20 years, if you go to Katsina or Zamfara State, for instance, and pull out the army from those places, in roughly 1 month or 2 months, now as we are speaking, those states will be overrun. Look at what happened in Afghanistan, you know, where the access to education was as poor as, it's like in northwest Nigeria. The Americans pulled out after fighting the Taliban for 20 years, and President Biden was beating his chest and saying he didn't see any scenario in which the Taliban could seize power for at least 9 months to a year. They pulled out, and within 6 days, the Taliban were back in power. We all watched it on TV. People throwing their children over the fence at the airport. Please take my child, they are coming. They have arrived in the city and so forth like that. So, you know, the data can tell you where these things can happen 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So this false narrative that it is the service chiefs that will guarantee peace and security, that it is the police that will guarantee peace and security, all these things are not correct.
Okay.
Peace and security is based on sustainable development.
But another critical thing about the census that many have been asking, perhaps you can clarify for us, is should it be the counting of indigenes or the counting of residents?
No, it's the counting of residents, because, I mean, if you are there, I mean, the children need to go to school. I mean, how can it be that you are going to school or you are accessing healthcare based on whether you are an indigent? And in any case, what is really an indigent? Every time you see the Nigerian Diaspora Commission beating their chest anytime anybody of Nigerian origin is elected to the parliament in Canada or in the UK or US, people that migrated only 10 or 15 years ago have been elected to parliament or been appointed to positions. I mean, even in countries where they don't speak English, there is a Nigerian in the Italian Senate. You know, I mean, where do we speak Italian in Nigeria? So you see them say, a Nigerian has been appointed, you know, has been elected, they are proud of all those kind of things happening abroad. But when it comes to Nigeria, you know, the people start talking of indigene. How can you do those kind of things within a country? It's either you are a full Nigerian or you are not. So access to public services should not be based on where you are from, education, healthcare, road, housing. So, of course, the census should count everybody. Now, there are scenarios in which the indigenous question is important. Like, in the South, for instance, the indigenous question is important in terms of resource control. And actually, it is a big question. Because, if people are living in villages and towns in an area where there's a lot of oil and gas, and they are not benefiting at all from it, but they can see the oil and gas disappearing out of Nigeria, and they are suffering from soot and polluted waters and things. They don't have jobs. They don't, all those things are legitimate issues. But when it comes to things like census, counting people as a basis for access to public services, please, everybody, if you are a Nigerian, you are a full Nigerian anywhere you are until otherwise in the future, if anything goes wrong. But now, if you're either a citizen or you are not.
Okay. Quickly, before we go on to a couple more questions, let me just we'll open the phone lines. We'll get a response from the listener. You have questions to ask, contributions to make, let us know. We're also asking what you think. If you go on Facebook, there's a post up there. Do you agree with the popular opinion that census figures are political? And we've got quite a lot of people responding to that on Facebook. We'll be taking some of those comments in a matter of moments. It is Nigeria Info 92.3 PH on Facebook and Nigeria Info PH on Twitter. The WhatsApp number is 0809 030 6416 0809 030 6416. My guest has been Rotimi Sankore, policy and development expert, and we've been discussing the World Population Day and the need for a census in Nigeria. Quite a lot has been said. The numbers to call are 0817 923 0003 0817 923 0007. Robin is on the line, calling from Ichie. Hello, Robin. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, my brother. It's Andrew.
Welcome. Go on.
Special greetings to your guest. In fact, the issue about population, as I know before now, and being highlighted broadly by the guest, cannot be overemphasized. The lesson I have learned this morning from his teaching on radio, my value to it is more than 10,000 naira. You see, like as he said, some of us, when we speak, they say because we do not know, we are speaking from uninformed side. They say the problem is the people. The people. Whereas with what he has even said, is something I know, that the problem we are having in this country is our leadership. No policy properly put together. You can imagine the National Population Commission, I was following them up, according to them, they have spent well over 200 billion naira. Population was to be held. For no reason, the former President Buhari put it off. Now the new president is here, Senator Ahmed Tinubu. In less than 2 months, the same Population Commission have run to him to explain that the over 200 billion was usually spent, and on it they are asking for additional over 200 billion. I think we are joking. Our leaders are joking. Look at what he said. Like we are talking about, the governor today in this local, let's come to the subnational in River State, does not know how many hospitals we have in Ahoda East local government area. Does not even know the villages. Each time we shout, so health center, there's no hospital, there's no place to overcome, but he does not know. And they don't care. Look at his explanation. If a certain percentage of youth do not have access to primary school, they don't know anything about primary school, how can the society, how can the chief of staff, how can the police, how can they police us? Look at around Port Harcourt. Go to all the post stops that are agro. Do the government care? They don't care. These agro branches, chase people, private vehicles, commercial vehicles, and the government does not care. What they care is things that will benefit them. So I call on the present president, those who, if they are listening, we should continue to talk. Thank you for your platform.
Thank you very much.
Bless you.
All right, Blessed is in Alu. Good morning, Blessed.
Good morning, my brother in the studio.
Right,
pertaining the census of 18, what we need to do in Nigeria, we should look into it very well. The census of 18, after we have done it, it needs to change the narrative of the country. We should not say either indigenous or a resident. We should be a resident issue. Because we have been saying something of indigenous and non-indigenous in this country. Non-indigenous or indigenous is not given on what we need. Just like now, when Nigerian people go to the outside country, they may be among of the people that they appointed or elected offices in a political office holder. So I'm appealing to the federal government. After the census of 18, it will give us the database of the Nigerians. Tell us that this is what you need to do, this is what you no need to do. It can give us good access to the health sector, it can give us good access to the education sector, and so on and so forth. That's my own concern. Let's talk about citizenship. We should not talk about the indigenous of the country. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Rotimi, if we take a critical look at the theme for this year's World Population Day, it's focused a lot more on gender equality and the fact that we want to tap into that, which brings me to my next question: how we can, what specific issues are rising relating to the gender and the youth? How does census and this data help us in those areas? Just hold on to your thoughts. Let's hear from, we take 2 more calls and then you respond to that. Muriel is on the line from Okrika. Hello, Muriel. Good morning.
Thank you. Excuse me. Good morning. She's a woman on the line.
Go on.
Excuse me. We cannot underestimate the importance of census. Look, of the truth, I wonder how the government planned, even without knowing its labor force, without knowing the number of elderly it has, without knowing its number of children. Look, you can't plan without. How can a father plan when you don't even have to? You don't even know the number of persons you're planning for. Look, with census, the government will know the youthful population it has and how to amass it. It will know the elderly, the aged population, and even the children. It will know with the amount of children, the volume amount of children you have. You will know the number of schools, whether they are commensurate with the number of pupils. You can't even plan without census. So sometimes I wonder, how do they plan without knowing? They don't guess. They say we are 117 billion with 22 billion. I don't understand. So I think even their plan and their budgets are fraud without proper estimates. They should go ahead and do the census. Even the palliative they want to bring up now. Now, how do we know what population and what population needs this and needs that? How do we measure these things? You just use guesswork and use our money anyhow. They should go ahead and immediately conduct the census so that they know how to plan and what they are planning for.
All right, Muriel.
Thank you
very much. Okay, sorry to me. You heard that. Let's come back to you now. And the question, tapping into the gender inequality that we have and how the census, knowing this data, can help us specifically handle such issues.
Thank you. So the main theme for the World Population Day in 2023 is harnessing the potential and aspirations of girls and women. And the significance is this. If you look at any part of the world, any community where there are high levels of poverty, this poverty is mainly based amongst girls and women. In other words, anywhere you have the highest number of girls and women that can't read and write, that haven't had access to education, that you have no business skills, that are not employed, those areas are most likely to be the poorest parts of any community, state, country, or the world. I mean, you just need to look at a country like Nigeria, and you will see that in those states where negative practices like forced child marriage, for instance, where in states in Nigeria where 60, 70, 80% of girls and women have been forced into child marriage. In other words, from the ages of 12, 13, 14, 15, they've been forced into coercive reproduction, and their whole development has been restricted. It means that one, as individuals, not only their rights have been violated, but they've been sentenced to poverty. Then in addition to that, they are forced into a scenario where they have an average of 7 children each. The total fertility rate in the northwest of Nigeria, for instance, is, I think, 7.3 children per girl or woman. In reality, that's the average. In reality, it's often up to 10, 11, or 12 per girl or woman. It leads to high maternal mortality, which means there is a high number of orphans. And where you have a high number of orphans who don't have access to education, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that bandits and extremists recruit a majority of these orphans, to participate in their terrible activities. So, gender equality, women's rights is important in its own right because women are equal human beings. I know some people don't share this, but it is a fact. I mean, we're in the modern world now where everything is based on brain power. Any girl that has access to engineering education will do as well as any man. Any girl that has access to medical education will do as well as any man. I've been giving people an example recently. I just recovered from cancer. The consultant doctor that diagnosed the cancer is a woman. The oncologist, the cancer specialist that led the treatment is a woman. So I mean, just imagine if they don't have access to education. So, it's really important. If you look at those areas where girls and women are denied access to education, even basic things like healthcare, you see the men who are denying their daughters access to education, saying that they don't want men to treat their wives, that they don't want male doctors. But where are the female doctors going to come from if they are restricting their children, their girl children, from going to school? So, the importance of gender equality, women's rights, it really can't be overstated. The most developed countries in the world are the top of what is called the Global Human Development Index. Countries like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Canada. In other words, all these countries Nigeria want to jump back to. These are the most equal countries in the world. Their development is not based on oil or gas. It's based on human capacity. The fact that everybody can achieve their full potential and contribute to any area, any specialization that they wish to be educated in, or they have the capacity to be educated in. So Nigeria will have a lot to benefit, from promoting, from promoting equality of aspiration.
All right, let's take a few messages, then we'll come back and take your parting words. Let's start with Facebook. Baba Safety Jose says, your guest in the studio this morning should please forward this to our politicians, because even our politicians need to be educated too. That is why they also lack ideas and creativity. The level of poor thinking amongst politicians today is what is also taking us backwards. Justice Ori says, census is necessary. At least we need accurate and reliable data and statistics of our population and houses across the nation. It will aid and support government's decision for the good of Nigerians. Udo Weke says, I agree there is plenty of politicization, which is the special word that we have coined for ourselves, with the census figures in Nigeria. Edward also agreed with that, says there is, it's political most of the times, census figures. I would also take some of your comments on Twitter. We have a few of them coming in on Twitter at the moment. We'll be addressing those. But meanwhile, let's see on WhatsApp. This one says, Good morning, Mr. Andrew. How can we get the contact of your guest this morning? I think he just gave out his Twitter handle, so you can go follow him. If I'm correct, Rotimi Sankore. Am I correct?
Yes.
At Rotimi Sankore. That's Sankore. All right.
Yeah.
So just go on Twitter and you can follow him and get more information. Mr. President and his country need a resource person like this to right the wrongs of this nation in terms of planning and physical development of this nation. I think if all the states, local governments, if this is something that's implemented at the smallest unit, which arm of government, which would be the local government, if it's implemented from the local government to the state and the federal government, even communities on their own, traditional rulers can decide to even begin to have this data and information of people in their communities, in their villages. It starts from everybody trying to keep data, and that's how we're able to be very accurate. This one says, please, you give out the link you mentioned in your 8 a.m. news bulletin, okay? After this discussion of the day, even if everyone is counted in Nigeria's next census, the figures would still be manipulated, same way they did with the results of general elections. Personal interest in our politics has overtaken national interest, and yet here sent that messaging. This one says, what a country. What's the need for all so-called education if we can't even have simple data of Nigerians? So you see some of the concerns of a few of the listeners here displaying their messages. We don't have a lot of time, so I can't take all of them, but just those few. The major worry for many people here is largely the fact that we saw what happened with the elections and all of the machineries and all the money spent by INEC, and see where we are. And in the past, questions have been raised with regards to the census figures that we churned out, especially what happened in the last census in 2006, which brings us now to this census. As we attempt to wrap things up, let's just get your thoughts. A lot of issues raised already. For you.
Well, I mean, the irony is that a lot of things that went wrong with the election actually went wrong because of the poor civil registration in the country and the lack of census in the past. Look, if every birth is registered and every death and the cause of death is registered, there will be no need for PVC, because right away we'll be able to tell this month in July all the children in any local government that will turn 18 in 18 years' time. You know, I mean, and they will have, developed country, what they call social security number, and so forth like that. And all those things, you know, so if you have social security number from when you are born, your birth is registered, the census just helps us get a bigger picture. So all these things about IREV and PVC will be unnecessary. I always tell people, for those of us who have been unfortunate to have lived, worked, or studied abroad, in my own case, for about 20 years, if you are going to vote when you are in a developed country, unless it is a particularly contentious election, you do it in 15-20 minutes. You do it on your way to work. Voting happens during the weekday. The country is not shut down, and so forth like that. And it is essentially because the civil registration and census, especially the civil registration, the register of birth, death, and the causes of death, the census just helps with big picture. So when people say, it can be politicized, look at what happened with the election, the failings in the election as a result of the failings in birth registration. So you have to go and artificially create something called PVC. So I will urge people, the process may not be perfect, but if you are not counted, you can't come out and say there is no school in your area because you don't exist. If you are not counted, you can't come out and say no health center in your area, you don't exist. For those who may be inclined to try and manipulate the figure to raise the number so that they can get more federal government funds for themselves, the likelihood is less this time. Like they said, it is digital. The figures will go straight to the cloud. And in any case, the figures they tell us will be available to everybody. You can see it. We should be able to see it on the internet, to have a kind of dashboard. You know, I mean, I can tell you now in what city in America in 20 years' time white people will be a minority because of census figures. If you give me, I can tell you where they are going to have problems with education if they don't build more schools. The figures are online. So, I mean, we'll see it online. We'll be able to learn from it. We'll be able to grow and learn how to fix this thing. So I will urge people, participate. The census is a key tool for governance, peace and security, and to end poverty and inequality.
All right, Rotimi Sankore, thank you very much. The conversation can continue forever. There's always a lot more to say. But for you now, I think for what you've said, it's just shown how crucial it is for us to conduct this census, and not just after the census, to ensure that we continually generate and keep stored data, very important data, especially the one that many people do not take very seriously, civil registration. Which would really help a lot as well if we know how many people are born, how many people have died, and we know how to plan with this. It's very, very important. I mean, if there's anything anybody can take out of what you've said, it's the fact that it is important to have data of the people in this country. Thank you once again for your time.
Thank you again so much.
Do have a great day.
You too.
Well, there you have it for this morning. So when the census comes around, do well to be a part of it, participate. And here in the state, I think the government would need to begin to look more tentatively to these issues, proper attention. I think we have to realize that the way we think in our politics needs to change. The way we approach our politics needs to change. The fact that it's even difficult to speak with government officials, the fact that once a government official gets into one position, they're like gods. You can't talk to them. They don't have your time. You're a public servant. People need information. People need these things. You have to put data. You have to have data. Local government chairmen, councillors, everybody need to work. If you really want to see the nation change, you want to see Rivers State change, there is a lot of work to be done, and not just criticism from party lines or hate. You have to be honest and put sentiments aside and do what is right. My name is Ifeemi Andrew. You can follow Rotimi Sankore on Twitter and Facebook. You can also check me out on Facebook, Ifeemi Andrew, on Twitter, Ifeemi Andrew Official, Instagram, Ifeemi Andrew Official, on TikTok. Yes, new on that one, Ifeemi Andrew 1. Ifeemi is spelled Ifiemi. Hello Port Harcourt is next, and Jude is standing by. It promises to be exciting. I don't know what the power situation is in your area, but I'm pretty sure Jude would have a lot to talk to you about with regards to power in Port Harcourt in the past couple of days. Stay tuned.
You are tuned in